Well, in a study that's not exactly surprising to anyone and yet shocking to everyone, it looks like we may be headed for a civil war. A new poll shows that nearly 50% of Americans think the U.S. is headed for a civil war within the next few years. We're going to break that down and explain a little bit next on The Adam Boyer Show.
In a world gone crazy, common sense, logic, and Christian values are needed. Adam Boyer is here to provide you all three in The Adam Boyer Show.
So a poll just came out from the University of California Davis Violence Prevention Research Program and the California Firearm Violence Research Center. This is per theweek.com. When asked to respond to the statement, quote, "In the next few years there will be a civil war in the United States," 47.8% of respondents chose do not agree. 36.4% said they somewhat agree with the statement, 8.4% agreed strongly, and 5.3% agreed very strongly. The remaining 2.1% chose not to respond. So, in other words, less than 50% of the U.S. thinks there will not be a civil war in the United States, according to this poll. Very interesting also in other parts of the poll, more than two-thirds of respondents agree that there is a serious threat to our democracy, while more than 40% indicated that having a strong leader for America is more important than having a democracy. And of course, by democracy, all the respondents who think America is a democracy know it's a republic, but those that think America is a democracy means how we have it set up right now under the Constitution. They mean a republic, but they're saying democracy because they don't know the difference. The study was conducted by the polling firm Ipsos, I think that's how you pronounce their name, and surveyed 8,620 respondents in English and Spanish between May 13th and June 2nd. Findings are, quote, subject to sampling error and have not yet been peer reviewed. This study is from a few days ago, so it's not outdated at all. Moving over to Not the Bee, the very good conservative news outlet. They say, today in news that's absolutely not good, a new research paper has been published that demonstrates the deterioration of American unity, with a full half of Americans now preparing for civil war. The study, conducted by researchers from the University of California, Davis, found the following conclusions. Two-thirds of respondents perceived a serious threat to our democracy, but more than 40% agreed that having a strong leader for America is more important than having a democracy, and that, in America, native-born white people are being replaced by immigrants. So, really none of this, when you look at it from any angle, adds up well for Democrats, because, we got old Grandpa Joe coming into office claiming he's going to be the unifier, and then he goes and calls MAGA group the most extreme political organization in history.
The MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
I made a YouTube short about that. A lot of y'all liked it, apparently. But, half, 50.1%, agree that in the next few years there will be a civil war in the United States. Again, none of this looks good for Democrats any way you size it up. The midterms are shaping up to be huge for Republicans. I know I kind of always go there in these podcasts or the show, and I say, this is why it looks good for Republicans, but it really does all come back to that, and I think it's going to be a huge red wave in the midterms. And, I actually made a whole episode breaking down statistics on that, and you can watch it. It'll either be linked now in a card, possibly, or it'll be linked at the end of the video. Among 6,768 respondents who considered violence to be at least sometimes justified to achieve one or more specific political objectives, 12.2% were willing to commit political violence themselves to threaten or intimidate a person, 10.4% to injure a person, and 7.1% to kill a person to achieve a political end. I am not saying that I agree or disagree. Obviously, there's never an excuse for killing someone other than, in the case of biblical capital punishment or war or something. But all these people, what is this, like in total 27% or so, being willing to commit extreme violence to achieve a political end? Really? That's where we are in this country now? Getting back to the poll, among all respondents, 18.5% thought it was at least somewhat likely that within the next few years, in a situation where they believe political violence was justified, I will be armed with a gun, and 4% thought it at least somewhat likely that I will shoot someone with a gun.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Again, things just not looking wonderful. Back to Not the Bee. Because this is a summary and hasn't been peer-reviewed, We don't have a breakdown of who answered questions, which may be which messed that up. We don't have a breakdown of who answered questions, which way, based on political party and personal ideology. I'd be very curious, for example, to see how the questions about political violence were framed, or if the political affiliation of respondents was hidden. I find academics don't like mostly peaceful leftism to be painted in a bad light. This is the writer for Not the Bee. Along those lines, it's important to note that this study was funded by a buttload of leftist organizations. The Joyce Foundation, the California Wellness Foundation, the Hy-Sing Simmons Foundation, the California Fire and Violence Research Center, and the ePrint platform hosting this study brief is itself funded by a program started by Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. Why is this important? Because studies like this will be used as the basis to disarm you in coming years. Half of Americans think civil war is inevitable. A half-cognizant Nancy Pelosi will yell with a closed fist. Then she'll know, as the paper's authors did with proximity, that over 40% of Americans think strong leaders are more important than democracy. Notice the study says nothing about the laws that make up our constitutional republic. Thank you, Not the Bee. And that approximately the same percentage of people believe in the great replacement theory of white people. Oh, we don't talk about that. I might be censored on YouTube for that. Whoops, not supposed to say that. That's finally starting to get some mainstream traction. Tucker had a monologue about that, the great replacement theory. Excellent stuff. I love his monologues. But yeah, I don't think there's much question. Maybe I'll even do an episode on that, about the great replacement theory. If you don't know what that is, it's basically the theory that we are purposely in the U.S. trying to be replaced, the powers that be are trying to replace white people with Hispanics and other minorities and raise them up, so to speak, bring them out of the country and overtake white people, so to speak, not through violence necessarily, but through voting, and so the Democrats permanently stay in power. Just one of the many ways Democrats are trying to do that. Do you think they'll work to cool tempers, stop the border crisis, protect Americans that elected them, or further enshrine your rights? Not to be asked. Or do you think they'll use this as a tool to justify taking away your guns and freedoms because you're a racist menace and extremist threat focused on treason? Read the study's conclusion. Coupled with prior research, these findings suggest a continuing alienation from and mistrust of American democratic society and its institutions. Substantial minorities of the population endorse violence, including lethal violence, to obtain political objectives. Efforts to prevent that violence, which a large majority of Americans already reject, should proceed rapidly based on the best evidence available.
Will you shut up, man? Listen,
Further research will inform future prevention efforts. Again, remember this was largely funded by the California Firearm Violence Prevention Center. So, says Not the Bee, so legislation that prevents that violence should rapidly proceed. Considering the background of these researchers, scholars at a school run by far-left ideologues, and their funders, far-left ideologues, what do you think they're talking about here? I'll let Beto give you a hint. And of course, they link the GIF where he says, "Yes, we're going to take your AR-15." And for the sake of this being a family-friendly show, I will not give the full quote of what he said. So, further polling that backs up, I'm trying to think how I should say this. If we do come to a civil war in America, it's going to be conservatives against liberals, freedom against communism, likely be Democrats, the trans community, all of them, although not that they'll do anything other than scream, but the trans community, Democrats, all of them, with the big government against freedom-loving, common majority of Americans. Polling from Insider all the way back in 2017 showed that the gap between Democrats and Republicans is larger than ever before, as shown by a series of surveys taken regularly since 1994. The report by Pew Research Center shows that the gap between both parties' views has widened across almost every major policy issue over the last 23 years, from their opinions on big government to the place of immigrants in American society. Overall, the disparity between the parties is now at 36%, which is almost double the 15% gap that existed when the surveys began. This means that the median views within both parties are farther apart than they have ever been before. 95% of Republicans are more conservative than the median Democrat, and 97% of Democrats are more liberal than the median Republican. All very believable. They go on to say, historically, the more moderate someone's view was, the more likely it was that they were closer to the median political position between both parties. Today, this correlation no longer exists. There are now small peaks on both the consistently conservative and consistently liberal sides of the distribution. What more can I say? I don't know. This country is full of disunity, and honestly, I just want to say that there's not a political solution to this. we can do things to help advance unity politically and try to bring back the Constitution politically, but ultimately the country's strayed from God, from Jesus, from the Bible, from Christianity, real Christianity. I just don't really know what else there is to do politically. I don't think there really is much. It's going to require a reformation across America. That really is what it's going to have to be. Not only do we need to vote and do everything politically we can, we've got to do our best to spread the gospel. And remember, the Bible says, I will grow my church, or I will build my church more accurately. So, yeah, we need to do our part in building the church. Before I end the episode, I want to just ask, should it, heaven forbid, come down to a civil war, which side do you think would win? The Democrats and the big government and the military versus freedom-loving conservatives and normal people. Currently, approximately, remember, there's civilian firearms, 400 million, approximately 400 million firearms in civilian hands in the U.S. per AmericanGunFacts.com. So, it really comes down to, should there actually ever be a civil war, it's going to be those two sides. It would be bloody. That's for sure. And the only reason the liberals would have anything going for them would be the military and the big government on their side. I think even then, though, and then there's mixed opinions on this, how much of the military would actually obey orders, the police. But if you get even 50,000, I'm not advocating for violence here, let that be known. Just say if you get 50,000 people to march on Washington, D.C., of the conservative side, and they take over the White House and all that, it's over. That's really all they have to do. They take over the presidency, they can get the government from there, and the military is just not equipped enough to stop that without short of nuking something or bombing it. So either way, should we ever actually face a real civil war, it would be bloody, and we need to hope it never comes to that. We need to hope much more that we see a reformation come across America. And of course, that is what author Rick Boyer is going to be discussing very soon on this show. So stay tuned for that. More episodes of The Adam Boyer Show coming very soon. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know down in the comments your opinion on this. Will we face a civil war soon? As I said, we're going to see a lot of interesting stuff coming to America soon in voting, in politics, religion, even more than likely. Going to get pretty interesting. Whoa, you just made it to the end of an episode of The Adam Boyer Show. If you've made it all this way, you must have liked what you've seen, so you know what you need to do, right? Like the video, help the reach spread, and get the word out about this show. Also, subscribe. You won't regret it.